Hi, Mia. Hi, Pike. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Hi,
Hey, how's it going?
good.
Yeah, doing all right.
And Ashir, you got my note about the report outline?
No, let me double check.
Just a little while ago. I was just looking back at it again and I noticed that yeah, it was like 15 minutes ago when I was prepping. It's the inventory of the existing landscape is still like there. I think we had talked about like striking it out, but I think in the version it got saved, it's still like kicking around in there.
Okay. Okay, I'll open the
The Google-
version on the Google Doc. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I just yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep, no problem.
Can someone confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Awesome, thank you.
My headphones always like to do that. It's like, I'd like to put you in a completely different setting than anytime you've opened this before.
Yeah, and it like works always, and then when I have like an actual meeting with external folks, it just stops working. So
Welcome, everyone. Give everyone a few more minutes to come in, but thanks for joining right on time. Really appreciate it. And I'm saying good morning, but it's actually afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday to you, sure.
No, I heard this joke from someone while others are joining. People don't refer to Tuesday as normal Tuesdays anymore. It's almost become Taco Tuesdays.
I mean, it's a good day to have a taco. I wouldn't stop anyone from having a taco today. All right.
Okay, I think we have at least a quorum, so I am going to call this meeting to open. Just a few housekeeping details as always. If everyone who is on the EAG could put on their camera as much as possible, that's always helpful for us to, keep track of, who's voting on what. And members of the public keep their camera off unless they're speaking. And with the chat, if EAG members could use the chat for purely administrative matters, and everyone else not use the chat at all unless Ashira asks you when we're taking public comment and having trouble. Really disrupts the flow of the meeting if we are using the chat for other purposes. So I'll just go through the agenda really quickly. Let's see. So reviewing and approving the minutes, regular updates from the PUC, regular updates from the TAG. The next task is we're going to revisit that final report outline and hopefully create some working groups or at least working assignments based on that. We'll take public comment on that piece. We have some follow-ups on the equity rubric, questions from the TAG and ideas from this group, review from the public engagement subgroup and the credit ownership group. We'll take another round of public comment and wrap up with next steps before we close. So as always, a busy agenda, but we'll try to go through it as quickly as possible. In terms of the meeting minutes from April 30th, does anyone have any questions or corrections on that front? Okay, seeing none, I will ask for unanimous consent to approve the April 30th, 2024 meeting minutes. Can I have a show of hands for unanimous consent? Okay, I'm reading this as unanimous consent, so I consider those minutes approved. Great. And now I will turn it over to Dominic for the regular updates from the PUC. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Two fairly quick updates from the PUC. The first is something that was talked about quite a bit at the last EAG meeting, which was a plain language overview of CHS, Act 18, those 41 dense pages. So that was included in the packet. It has also been uploaded to our website. It is linked on the right-hand side of the website under basically like an explainers and how-to section. So it's pretty prominently displayed on the website. You'll notice from the file title that it is dated. We do not have any current plans to make any updates, but we anticipate that we will be making some updates to it in the future. And so if at any point there is a suggestion of something to be tweaked or a item topic to be added, we're definitely open to hearing that and would consider making further iterations. The second thing that I wanted to mention, also related to something that this group talked quite a bit about last time, which was the public engagement meetings and the recordings that came along with that. We have gotten both of those links, and they are both posted up on the website under consultants. So if you go to our website, it's one of the drop-down menus. I think it is further towards the bottom just because it's listed second. But there are links to both of those recordings, and they're also up on our YouTube page if you want to see them directly that way. Other than that, not a lot from these PUC side. Happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, Srini.
Thanks for sharing this, Dominic. So a couple of high-level comments. So I think the intent of this document is purely educational, right? So the comments that I'm going to offer is basically an attempt to add more context, I guess. I think the document does a good job of explaining what clean heat standard is, and what is the scope, some general comments on what to expect on fuel bill, all that. I guess I was just the first page talks about emissions as a whole. I think this refers to all heating related emissions, I believe. So it's got residential, commercial, industrial, all fossil fuel related. So I see that it serves the purpose of potentially educating residential, commercial, as well as industrial customers or property owners. I was just wondering how does one relate to the individual role of greenhouse gas emission reduction with respect to this high-level picture. I guess what I mean by that is, if a household is, responsible for 5 or 10 metric tons of CO2 for household heating, based on whether it is the type of fuel, I'm just wondering whether it would be helpful to give some context on, what does that represent?
By represent, you mean give individual households an opportunity to see like what their percent contribution to the statewide emissions is? I'm not understanding.
Yeah. So it's like, for example, Department of Energy has got guidelines on what a typical household, housing related, heating related emissions are, transportation related emissions are. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here, but some readily information available that is publicly that people are able to connect. So that's one suggestion as far as making it more contextual for the individual property owner. I guess the discussion here doesn't refer to anything else about other agencies or what is already out there. So is this completely independent of what Efficiency Vermont is doing or what the federal IRA program is doing? I mean, some comment will be helpful, or otherwise people will be wondering, is this completely independent of everything else?
So this was developed just by the PUC without consultation from any other state agencies and is intended to look at Act 18, almost as it describes itself. And other than the introductory portion of Act 18, this potential program is designed to operate theoretically independently of other things that are going on. ANR is doing some great work on modeling business as usual versus different decarbonization scenarios and what that looks like both in an environmental and an economic factor. But the PUC in general makes an effort to stay well within our statutory bounds. And so adjacent resources from the federal government, I think, might be useful, just as people's individual contributions may be a useful lens to add to this. But we were really looking at as like, okay, you don't know what Act 18 is, but you would like to.
I see.
Here's where we can.
Okay. Okay, and then the last point is, I know that there has been early engagement or little engagement from the public engagement sessions. I was just curious whether there are any specific type of questions that have come up that have been addressed as part of this. So.
Let me pull up my notes. The first thing that jumps into mind is we did have someone at the last public engagement meeting who spent a good amount of time talking about wood and the health and energy implications there. The last public engagement session also talked a bit about how to communicate the information beyond the group that was there. This past public engagement session had a couple of people who were just members of the public and held no other affiliation. There was one person from the Vermont Natural Resources Council, and there were a number of people from town and regional energy committees who understandably were interested in these proceedings. So there was a fairly robust conversation about call it grass tops versus grassroots efforts around this kind of work. And then one of, in the PUC's eyes, most productive parts of the conversation were the need for navigators for the clean energy transition. There are many households, especially households of limited means, who do not have the time and resources to navigate what is often a very complex world of decarbonization incentives, programs, sticks, carrots, whole 9 yards. And so there was a lot of support in this meeting expressed for finding a way to make sure that there were people, not just PDFs or printouts that could help especially low-income consumers navigate our brave new world out here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see, Matt, you also have your hand up as well.
Yeah, is this the time? And if it's not, but we're commenting on the PUC's overview of Clean Heat Standard document. Okay. Just a a very well done document, just a couple important edits. First is in the first paragraph, the Global Warming Solutions Act passed in 2020, not 2021. And then further down, well, what effect it will be having my fuel bill. The edit that I suggest would be the price per gallon heating fuel expected to increase, yes. However, depending on the type of clean energy measure home installs, there could be, not requiring them to use less. We're just saying there could be. So change should to could. And then there should be a decrease in energy costs through weatherization. Yes, through weatherization, but also through other measures. I don't think we should single out weatherization. I would just delete that. or more stable and predictable heating costs. Yes, absolutely, but not solely through electric heat pumps. There are other many ways to provide more stable and predictable heating costs. So I would delete that as well. So 2 deletions, 1 fix of the date, and the should to could. And I think this this product is well done. I'm happy to
Much
text it to Dominic.
Yes, please do. I was able to capture most of it in notes, but as you hear, there's a truck behind me. So I'm gonna go shut my window, and if Matt, if you could send those to me, it'd be much appreciated.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Matt. And Mia?
Yeah, I just want to highlight that, like, this is something I've asked the PUC for. This is things that other of you have mentioned, you know, more resources that are productive for these conversations. I think this is like a thing that the EAG has done that has produced a result from the PUC and that will help inform these discussions. And I listened to the previous public engagement sessions, and they're like, it would be great if there was a document that explained all this, and now we have it. So I do think this is an example of like us influencing the process for the better, and it's only one step, but you know, it's good to see something tangible that will actually help the process. And I know we've been in the planning stages for a long time, so I'm excited about this particular thing. And it's not a perfect summary, but it's the clearest basic explainer of like what we're all doing here that I've seen. So I'm excited. Thanks for doing that, Dominic.
Thanks, Mia. Dominic, do you have any other updates? Awesome. And does anybody else have any questions for Dominic about the PUC updates? Perfect. All right, so go ahead and move on. Well, I'll hand it back to Mia. You can move us on.
Ceremonially. Yeah, so I will hand it off to the TAG liaisons, Matt and Emily, for an update on what's going on in TAG World. Thanks.
Absolutely, I can start and then Matt can jump in or add anything that I missed. So a really high level update is that we reviewed Opinion Dynamics measure list. Opinion Dynamics is the entity doing the TRM work. And then Floyd, a TAG member from the Clean Fuels Alliance, gave a presentation on West Coast life cycle assessments to help educate the rest of the technical advisory group on this topic for future awareness. And then we had our typical breakout groups on the topics of credit ownership, pacing, and bioenergy. And then I'm just noting that we did discuss the equity framework for a few minutes. Is this a good time for me to provide some feedback? I can't remember off the top of my head.
So we'll go into deeper conversation about that later on in the agenda. So if you have a high level thing that you want to give, that would be great. But other than that, we'll go into it later on.
Perfect. Yeah. High level, I would say that the TAG was appreciative to have eyes on it, and there were some mixed reactions on whether the EAG needed to provide more context about who is going to use this and how, and some perspectives about the TAG should have further discussion on their own about how they would like to use this. But that's just really high level, and I'm happy to add more color to that feedback. And I'll hand it over to Matt if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, that was an excellent summary. I would just say that the TAG is meeting on Thursday, and we're prepared to submit comments on the technical advisory group to the PUC regarding credit ownership. And it feels like we're running on parallel tracks here. There's a lot of overlap between what the EAG is doing and what the TAG is doing. But the TAG has opinions, and we'll express them in a paper that will be finalized on this Thursday, on how credit ownership should be structured. Thank you.
Thank you. Mia, go ahead. And if there's any other questions, please raise your hand.
Yeah, I'll add, we discussed this in the credit ownership group, and also I feel like I've gotten a few questions about trying to do collaboration in general with the TAG, and especially on credit ownership. I've asked Rick, the chair of the TAG, about this, and it seemed like it was really a timing issue, which I don't foresee this getting done before. Yeah, it's not going to get done before the deadline on the 17th that the PUC has requested, but I do think there is still potential value in trying to get a collaboration together on credit ownership specifically, and any other issues that people highlight with the tag. So I'm happy to try to facilitate it. It seemed like the timing was not optimal for that one, but there we are. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
So clarification, I appreciate Matt's update that there will be a letter from the TAG group on credit ownership. So the way I understood that the equity framework feedback would be used is that when a recommendation is made, that tool would be used to kind of identify gaps of kind of who would be served by the recommendation, who would not be. Do we know if that was included or will be included in that letter on Thursday?
So that it will not. I think that a main question, and again, I'm happy to add color to this when we get to it, but real quick answer to that is that from my understanding, some questions from the tag were that there were so many decisions that were going to be made that they were unsure about which decisions they should use this rubric for, and unsure whether or not that's feedback from the EAG that determines that, or if that's discussed within the tag about when and how this rubric will be made, especially on tight timelines. So I think there's some questions about that.
Thank you,
I
Emma.
don't think it'll be used for this week.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Emily. And does anyone else have any questions for our two tag liaisons about the tag meeting? Like I said, we'll go into further detail later on. Also, I think this is a good opportunity to pause and see it, and we can revisit this later as well. But if there's anything that we'd like the EAG to request from the tag, or anything that we'd like to send through our tag liaisons. So maybe that's just something to hold on in our mind, and as we keep going through, we can see if there's anything that we might want to send over to them. Great. Okay. Well, with that,
Srini, I think, has a question, or sorry, you had your hand up, Srini.
Yeah, I was just gonna make the observation that I think this will be the first time since this initiative started, you know, some specific definition and design output has come from EAG, and it'll be coming from TAG soon, and PUC will be able to consolidate that and take a position. So I think it'll be an important juncture to figure out where things are aligned, where things are not aligned. You know, I go back to the example of how different states and cities have developed climate action plan. Some of them have done after the fact, the equity assessment. Some of them have done concurrently. Those who did after the fact, you know, it was a dragged out process for a very long time. So I just want to make sure that PUC recognizes the need to figure out how we bring alignment early on in the process. So, yeah.
I second that. Thanks, Srini.
great point. I've taken a note of that. So maybe that's something that we can touch base on at the next meeting, once we're able to see both of the memos. Great. Okay. So then I'll hand it back to Mia.
Great, thank you. Next we're going to talk about the report outline. Ishira, if you could bring that up, that would be really helpful in the Google Doc. So we, you know, basically Mia, Shira, and Dominic took the suggestions that people, you know, the existing outline that I drafted and the suggestions that came out of this group, and came up with, I think, an interesting way to kind of organize this research into manageable chunks that I'm really excited about. So we kind of revisited the design a little bit, and if you can start at the top. So we sort of took this as, you know, the same existing introduction that was in there. You can scroll down, Ashira. Just an executive summary, like recap of what the legislature asked us to do. And then Ashira's idea was to rethink this into basically three main segments: a design process, you know, how we interacted with the design and how equity was considered with the design, and that, coincidentally or not, actually matches our existing working groups. So we can recap the, you know, advice and feedback that came out of those groups, and those groups could serve as the basis of the report. And then the second section is an impact section. So we thought that there were some pretty high level themes, like we know cost is going to be an impact across, you know, many different groups. And we know that households that aren't able to, you know, electrify or access clean heat measures is going to be a reoccurring theme. And I don't think that's the only themes, but, you know, in order to make our report not super repetitive, we think we could tease out some high level themes that we're seeing repeatedly in the report. But the gravity of our group's work would really be organized into these demographic sections. If you can scroll down again. So the sort of groups that we sort of already picked out, you know, low-income households, moderate-income households, Vermonters of color, and specific subgroups within these. So like LIHEAP recipients are low-income households. So that would allow the, you know, we had envisioned either individual EAG members or small groups, not official subgroups, but small sort of collaborations, would take on these sort of demographic breakdowns, would do their own research to figure out the, you know, existing challenges, the potential benefits and harms, and under the clean heat standard, and recommendations. And that way, you know, we wouldn't have to take on these huge tasks like, what are all the recommendations and what are all the existing gaps, but more narrowly tailor our research. And then that way we could pull out existing themes like, wow, this issue has impacted, you know, many different subgroups, demographic groups that we've identified. And we put in some new ones like small businesses and obligated entities based on that feedback. So we'll get back to that, and I'll let Ashira facilitate that, but that would be, you know, basically how our work would be organized in the sort of short middle term is along those demographic issues. And then the last section, which I think we're going to need to flesh out some more, is specific implementation recommendations. And again, that would be separate from like, hey, a program helping renters or something would go sort of in the previous section, but basically here's how the PUC needs to act in the future to continue to ensure equity, like, or do something different in the framework. So specific implementation recommendations, which, you know, came up a lot in the last meeting. So how do they you know, ensure equity and, you know, continued consumer education and transparency and consumer protection, and what research needs and metrics for success should the PUC consider as they implement it, and who's going to review implementation success and ongoing equity issues. So, you know, to recap, like, I think this sort of three main part section is going to serve us well and let us target the things that we think are really important and sort of filter out this huge amount of noise that we're seeing in the data and all these related issues, and be really targeted. But I think there'll also be room for us to say like, oh, hey, we didn't think about this, but this is a really important issue and it needs to get added in some way. So I'm really excited about this. I think that'll let us start working, you know, essentially now and start doing our own research, which I know people have expressed interest in starting to really talk to people who are experts on these issues. So I will pass that along to Ashira to sort of take us on the next step with us. But a lot of this was her idea, and I'm really excited about it and appreciative. Thanks, Ashira.
Thank you, Mia. And yeah, like Mia said, this is what we did is we went through and we took a lot of the information that was inputted through the Mentimeter exercise that we did last meeting, as well as some of just the conversations that we've been having, and really tried to fill in some of the blocks. And right now, we're really just looking for a starting place. Like, instead of all collaboratively trying to write this at one time, really taking out some of the pieces, moving it into digestible sections so that we can start fleshing out some of the pieces bit by bit and continue through the next few months to refine that. That may look like us having dedicating individual meetings where we talk about maybe specifically talk about low-income houses and read through some of the recommendations and information that was already inputted on that, and continuing to dive in, refine, add more, etc. So right now the ask is to read through these and read through the groupings that we've created. And so it's up on the screen, but I can only scroll so much. So I've also added the link in the chat. So you should be able to access it there. If anyone's having trouble, please let me know. And we'd like you to read through the groups, especially paying attention to this demographic section, which has the Vermonters of color, the low-income households, moderate-income households, manufactured households, renters, small businesses, obligated entities, as well as the three somewhat broader categories, which were the potential benefits. Actually, right now, let's stick to the demographics because some of these are enfolded. And what we envision is that we'll be working simultaneously on some of the umbrella pieces, such as the cost and the benefits and things like that. But right now, focusing on some of the more specific demographics will allow us to tease out some of the potential recommendations, some of the potential benefits and harms, and we'll be able to find some of the common threads and some of the common themes. So the ask right now is to read through the sections, and if there's any that you specifically feel drawn to, I think at this moment I'd ask you to say it out loud, and I'll go ahead and input it into the document. And so we're asking that each member takes one section. There may be some areas where we could partner and team up, but we really just want one point person for each section at least, so that we can start moving some of these forward. And then by next meeting, what we're asking is to have some type of outline of your thoughts on this section. It does not have to be fully thought out at all. If you are inspired and want to write a whole, a couple of pages of your thoughts, that's great. But we're really just looking for an outline of thoughts so that we can at least have a point where we can begin reflecting and we can begin adding, and we're not just starting from a blank piece of paper. So I'll pause there. Are there any questions? Okay, not hearing any questions, and I'm hoping that everybody's just biting at the bit to call out their section first. But yes, Jen, I see your hand.
I'd be interested in doing the low income. That's people that I've had the most interaction with on these issues.
Great. Srini?
I would be interested in the low and moderate income as well, but I do have some comments on the groups you have listed here. Is this the time, or should I come back on that?
This is definitely the time. And one thing I forgot to mention is if you think that there's another group that should be in here,
Okay,
you can definitely put that in as well.
so I think we want to think about this equity issue from the perspective of how the specific groups may be challenged or limited in benefiting from this clean heat standard. So I think we talked about, for example, manufactured homes extensively the other day because of the infrastructure and other issues that presents itself as a challenge. So I would say, I think the Vermonters of color, I understand the intent here, but maybe the scope should be a broader group of the minorities. I don't know whether Vermont's of Color captures all the broader definition of minorities that every other organization uses. So that's just an observation on the first. Okay.
And by that, do you mean, can you explain a little bit more what you mean in the differences between the Vermonters of color and minorities?
So maybe I have not seen the category as Vermont's of Color before. I have seen other designation of minorities. So, like for example, does this Vermont's of Color, does it capture all the ethnic minorities in Vermont?
In general, that's what
Okay.
either like people of color, that it generally means any
Okay.
non-white.
Okay. If the intent is there, then that's okay. I'm okay with that. The second thing I would say is, if I think of people who are disadvantaged with clean heat standard in the context of electrification to eliminate fossil fuels, I think there are a large group of homes in Vermont that are older and I believe a lot of them still have hot water heat. They don't have ducted systems. And these older homes that don't have ducted systems, I believe, is a significant challenge. I mean, even modern homes that are bigger homes, I think I brought this up before. I live in a neighborhood, so that putting in one heat pump is not going to eliminate the fossil fuels. So, so I think we have to figure out a way to capture a category. To me, even though they may have the means, that group of homes are still disadvantaged because of the infrastructure issues.
Well heard. I'm looking to see if there's any place that we could combine those, and it looks like it might be a standalone.
Yeah.
Standalone.
I
Go
think
ahead.
we talked about this. So if you scroll up, there is a larger theme about households that are not able to readily access clean. So maybe it should be like homes that should not rather than households that should not. But I think there's not, that's going to appear over and over again. Like renters could live in those homes and also homeowners could live in those homes. So I think we're going to have to talk about that repeatedly, but I think when we were doing this sort of agenda setting planning, we're kind of like, well, it's just going to come up over and over again in our subgroups. So we should tease that out and be like, okay, this is repeatedly an issue over and over.
I see.
So I think it is a thing, but it seemed like a really big thing to tackle, and the solutions for that are going to be different when you come up with renters versus manufactured homeowners who may face the same program as, their homes are not easily transitionable. So I totally know what you mean. We just thought that was daunting, and it was better to segment and then build it back up, if that makes sense.
Okay. I just think that, like from, there are different lenses for looking at this so that you can actually facilitate ease of implementation to the extent that you can be very granular about it, very, very definitive about it. So yeah, okay, I can live with that. Thanks.
But it's important to consider, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping in there, Mia. And I'll just make a note here as well to consider older homes. Okay. And yeah, Shuni, does that capture? So like we said before, and thank you, Mia, for pointing that out, because it slipped in my mind that was one of the categories. These are categories that we'll definitely go back to and revisit after we've kind of pulled pieces out. But it's, as you're thinking through these are the exact questions that need to be going through your mind, and that we would love for you to document as you're writing your outlines and things like that, so that we don't lose these thoughts and we don't forget that just because they don't fit into the specific categories down here, we don't want to lose them for the actual report. Thank you. Chris?
Manufactured housing, please.
Okay. Emily?
I think that Efficiency Vermont has information to share on low income and moderate income households. And I'm just checking to see if it's okay if maybe there's information that we want to share in other sections, if that's okay. Okay, awesome.
Definitely. So there will be a process for us to share. We're all going to give input on all of these areas. Right now we're just looking for somebody to kind of be that point person at the beginning and to just get us started. But so we have separated out low income households and moderate income households, and we know that there's going to be a lot of overlap, but is that a section, is moderate income a section that you'd like to spearhead?
Sure. When you say spearhead, do you mean like gathering information from other equity advisory group members or filling it out mostly on our own?
So for the next 2 weeks in between now and the next meeting, it would be mostly filling it out on your own. So just creating an outline of some of the topics that you think should go in it, fleshing out as much or as little as you're able to. But of course, in that process, we welcome you touching base with other members. We welcome you touching base with other resources in the community that you have. It's just a way of pulling all the information into one document so that we can just start have a starting place.
Yeah,
for
we can
something.
start on moderate income. And again, happy to fill in other places where we have information to share as well.
Great. And Jeff?
The homes, didn't know if it would be helpful to put in parentheses technology challenges or something, because I think not only older homes, but there's other categories of homes that are going to be a challenge for some of that technology. And I guess I'm confused. I'd happy to be a part of the low income group, but I can't spearhead it. They've got too much going on. My second choice would be mobile homes or manufactured homes.
Okay. So then for those, then I would recommend, if you have any input, to reach out to Chris or
Gotcha.
Jen or Emily.
I will insert here, everybody is going to be writing some part of this report. Like we are just not going to be able to do this as a group just with our public meeting input. So everyone is going to have some part in writing this, and that's definitely going to be an expectation going forward. So we'll figure out how to do that in practice, but keep that in mind. Thanks, Ashira.
Thanks, Mia.
Yeah.
Srini? Oh, you're on mute. Srini, we're unable to hear you. Is anybody able to hear me?
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought in the beginning of my comments, I said either low or moderate income, but since those places are already taken, I'm happy to put my name for something else and see if I can, get it started. What about small businesses?
That'd be great.
Yeah. And just one more thing. I think as people work, I think I've shared this perspective with Mia before. As people work on this type of lens, it'll be good to have a common view of the segmentation such that we know the extent of the problem we are trying to solve. So what I mean by that is some of these low or moderate income, you may be able to easily dissect and say, this percent of the population represent this of the household. I'm not sure whether you can do the same for some of the other categories. So a common view of those segments in whatever way we can define that would be helpful.
Great. And does everyone understand what Srini means when he's saying adding some segmentation into these pieces? I'm gonna take that in. Go ahead.
Is that an open question or is that a?
Yeah, it's an open question.
Yeah, I think Shruti brings up some very important points. This is Jeff, which is we're not just dealing with manufactured home versus non-manufactured homes, which is an important distinction. We're also dealing with fuel type. We're also just the age of the home. For instance, what type of service panel, electrical service panel does that home have? We're dealing with either it's hydronic or ducted furnace. Those are all really important. Doesn't have to be separate groups, but they need to be part of that consideration. Can it be easily converted to electric heat, or is it more challenging? And then determining if that has an equity impact, meaning are lower income Vermonters less able to access these clean heat measures because they have, I mean, this is just an assumption, I don't know this, but because they have older homes without service panels, without insulation, without a service panel that can handle electric heat, and they have an existing fuel source in a system that can't easily be converted. Those are just part of those, I think, questions that need to be asked. And then while I'm still on mic, I'd love to take on the low income home energy assistance program. I've worked on the LIHEAP task force for 18 years and know the people and the project very well. So
We had that segmented under low-income households. I know that's a really big thing, so I think there's going to have to be some realignment. We thought we divided it these sort of other ones and then reassess what information was where, but I don't have any objection. That's kind of just how we did it because, you know, if you're benefiting from LIHEAP, you're part of this subgroup of low-income households. But I get what you're saying. Like, this is low-income households is too big of a task for one person for sure, but I also don't want to shortchange covering all our bases before we narrow down. So open to how to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking more of I'm happy to do more than one thing, but that one in particular, in the details of how the clean heat program would interact with the LIHEAP program, I think are really important conversations. So I'd like to take on that just narrow charge.
Thank you, Matt. So then if it's okay with Jen, I can add Matt as an extra source for the LIHEAP recipients, and then we'll go over to Ben and make sure that he has a chance to pick his as well, and then Matt will come back to you and see if there's another one that you can pick up as well. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ashira. I was gonna say I can start to spearhead the households and homes that are not readily able to access clean heat measures. I know it's a broad topic, but I can definitely get things started on that and start to build that section out.
And I'll touch back with Mia with this because I think the idea was and it's a continuous process, right? So where the idea is to get some of these the ones under the demographic segments out first, and then once we have fleshed that out, come back.
Okay.
To
Totally understand that, because obviously it's all going to tie into that. But I was thinking what struck me was the existing challenges and gaps in programs that probably could be, started separately from the demographics, at least in my mind. I don't know if anybody else disagrees, but because there's so many, we saw that spreadsheet, there's like 45 different programs or 43 different programs that probably need to be gone through and see where there's gaps and everything.
I don't want us to be too rigid, and I'm hearing that this is an important topic for the group, so I'm fine, if Ben really wants to start this and other people want to contribute to the section, I think it's fine. Let's make sure that, we have a plan for covering all these basic groups as well. I guess I would ask if that's possible. Like I said, I want to start big, at least on are we covering all the people who are likely to be, disparately impacted from this, and then make sure, we'll definitely see some variation. But so I'm fine if, you want to put your name down, Ben, and start doing that research, but let's just make sure we have all the groups covered.
Yep, understood.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And Jen?
I'm thinking that, Matt, if you wanted to take the low income, because you have so much experience with LIHEAP, I'd be happy to do the Vermonters of Color. Because I also work with the Office of Racial Equity and Inclusion here in at CVOEO, which I think will have a lot of information, particularly about new Americans. And I guess my other comment about that, and maybe this is what you were getting at, Srini, to make sure that Vermonters of Color includes Indigenous and other. So you know, I can expand that, but I'd be happy to kind of start the outline for that area.
Thank you so much, Jen, for being flexible with that. And Matt, I just want to check in with you if that's okay with you now taking on this whole section for low income. And you're on mute.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Thank you for that quick work. It looks like we may still have, and yes, I saw that Pike signed himself up for renters and rental property owners. And so the one that we still have remaining is the obligated entities.
John is not here today, I think. So let's see if he's up for that, and I can I or Ashira can coordinate with him on making sure that's done. So one way or the other.
Well, I kind of want to be on that one too.
Okay.
So how about we put, Matt, if it's okay, how about we put you on obligated entities? You have the most experience on that. We'll make sure we have special consultation for LIHEAP, and then yeah, I think, again, I really don't think that you're never going to have time to weigh in on other ones. I think it's just for an outlining step. So I don't know, Jen, if you want to move back to low income households, or we could ask John to do that too. I don't know. That's a big one to put on someone if they're not here.
Yeah, I would prefer to do obligated entities. I can summarize the LIHEAP program, I think, effectively as it relates to this program, but yeah, someone else probably should take the lead on that.
I'm happy to go back to low income, and also be a resource for Vermonters of Color, or
sorry, this is Jeff. I can do the.
Okay.
I'm totally unclear on what the lead has to do in the time commitments, but I can do low income since that's where I work. I'm just totally unclear on what it's required. If it's meaning getting input from others and putting it on paper, I can do that, as well as including my thoughts. And I agree with Matt, if he said it outright, I don't know, but I think the low income, the LIHEAP program could be LIHEAP program in itself could be a separate group, but I don't want to throw wrinkles in things at this point, but I guess that's what I'm doing.
We really thought this would be a good starting point to make sure all our bases are covered. We're getting a sense of like what issues are going to come up so that we can kind of phase them appropriately and potentially tie in with the PUC process, and make sure that there's a kind of point person going forward so that like this work continues. I don't think it has to be a final, like, this person whose name is on there will write this whole section alone. Like I said, I think people will break off some subtopics that are not content rich into more content rich ones. We just thought it would be helpful to have a point person to start the outline, figure out research needs, and then, you know, we'll reassess what those topics need. Does that make sense? I don't think it's finalized, Jeff, but it's also, I don't think it's a lifetime commitment to be the only person covering those issues, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know necessarily what research. I mean, I think, like, yeah, totally. I think I could spit out some things right now and get some feedback from other WAPs, but yeah. So put me down.
I'll jump in there. I'd really think about this next 2 weeks and the topic that you're given as almost, if you've ever done a stream of consciousness type of exercise, where it's just everything that you've been holding on in your mind about this specific topic, or even some of the other topics, and you want to like write a addendum or something like that. It's just everything that's in your mind about this topic, write it down. This is not the topic that you're going to own until the end. This is just the topic that you're helping launch and get off the ground. So if that means to you checking in with other people who are experts in this field and bringing some of that resource into an outline, that's great. If that means to you just kind of thinking the top broad line things that come to your mind and writing those down in an outline, that's great. If that means to you writing out an entire well thought out like 5-6 pages, that's fine. It's whatever process is best for you to get some information down so that we have a starting point. And then we'll use those as a touch base to start the conversation on each of these topics. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Sure.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, just to emphasize, like, so I'm doing mobile homes, but that's like a subset of low income. And I was going to talk about LIHEAP anyways, because that's such a relevant topic. So, you know, even though, you know, I was going to reach out to some of those same folks. So just, if anybody thinks of, oh yeah, manufactured housing would be relevant as part of your outreach, please give me a CC and I can attend conversations and contribute together, and it's awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. Go ahead, Ben.
So has anybody, I was just trying to see what else is left. Looks like we need the topic of impacts. Does somebody need to head that up? Because I can, you know, start things on potential benefits and costs of the Clean Heat Standard.
So these top groups are more overarching themes.
Overarching. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We could have done a little better job with the formatting to make that more obvious, but yeah, so right now these are all pieces that we're definitely going to dive into a lot deeper. But right now, just so that we have a place to start fleshing out things that are a little bit more attainable and not as like overarching broad themes, we're starting at the specific demographics, and then we'll continue to pull pieces, feed into what the overall impacts, cost, and benefits are. So that that's a little bit of the process, but it doesn't mean that those are going to be missing.
Got it. So yeah, basically all the demographic stuff we've been talking about is going to essentially inform the upper sections here, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Got
and
it.
then we'll add more.
Alrighty.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Anything missing? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'll send out a little bit more specific instructions just on what we're expecting for the outline. I really hear you with like, this is a vague request, and it's meant to be somewhat of a vague request just so that we can start getting just have a starting place. It doesn't need to be, you know, a finished product right now, but thank you for going through that exercise with me. And with that, I will hand it back over. Actually, with that, I'll open it up to public comment. So for the public comment session, if we could keep it limited to 2 minutes, just so that anyone who has questions are able to we're able to get through as many people as we can. And then after the end of your 2 minutes, if nobody else has any comments, we are happy to circle back to you. And for this public comment period, we have about 10 minutes total. We will have other opportunities for public comment later on in the meeting as well. So I'll go ahead and open the floor for that. Just go ahead and either raise your virtual hand or come off of mute and speak into the room. Okay, hearing no public comments, I'll go ahead and move us into the equity rubric questions section of our agenda. So this is going back to what Emily began to tell us a little bit about, which was the question of how to use the equity rubric, and that's a question that we received from the tag. So Emily, I don't know, I know that you had more to add, so if you want to go ahead and elaborate, especially about we heard that you say that there were mixed emotions about whether or not the EAG should add more information on how to use, and yeah, if you can just go ahead and continue to fill us in.
Yeah, would it be helpful if I just shared some of the notes I have regarding feedback to the rubric?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. So I heard that someone was unsure how the tag will be using this in decision making. If that part could be filled out further. I think that we have like a couple sentences on that. Someone felt that where the rubric fell short, it asks various questions according to concerns. It doesn't rank relative importance of different categories, and suggested it might be helpful for the PUC and any analyst in the tag if that kind of ranking could be considered for the categories. And then someone saw how this is applicable to pretty much everything, and to narrow down what this could be used for, and examples of how the tag could use this and points of where it can be used. Someone asked for additional guidance from the EAG on how to use the rubric. Someone suggested that this is a conversation that the tag should be having on their own versus seeking more feedback from the equity advisory group. Someone said it would be helpful to be explicit on who is going to fill this out, noting that the PUC is in design of the actual rule. Someone argued that they don't think a ranking of the different priorities will be helpful or achievable, going back to that previous point. And the point of this is more asking questions, and the consideration of different topics are brought forward. And the tag hasn't asked a lot of these questions, so they thought the rubric was great. Someone asked about if there will be an opportunity for more review from the tag to provide input and discussion on this rubric. One of those questions was related to a health nuance within the document, and I have overall the tag would like more discussion around the rubric, and it seems like an internal discussion with the tag is a potential next step, and also seeking more information from the equity advisory group. So that was a bunch of varying perspectives that I heard and took notes on.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking all those detailed notes. Yeah, does anyone have reactions, thoughts, questions?
I know our own group, I remember Jeff had some additional feedback, and it sounds like a great time to capture some calibration. You put it forward with the best intent, but the whole thing that I think is all great feedback. The whole intent of this is exactly as Srini kind of outlined before. It's procedural equity. That this is really. I thought that this would be used in design, not like a checklist after the fact. Of this is when a recommendation is made by tag, that it's an informed decision to put the recommendation forward. So by doing that, it's like, what's the point of the EAG? If there's not a procedural equity consideration, then we're just two parallel tracks with two different reports. Just saying that out loud, I just seeking feedback. I'm just saying what I was thinking out loud.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I think when we were doing it, it was more of some questions that might not readily come to mind, and kind of creating a variety of areas where someone might think about before they make a final vote. So I've always seen it as maybe a straw poll, helper, or to me, I would probably use it more having something that an action item to think about, and then use that to score it for myself, so that when the discussion came up in 2 weeks, I know that I had thought about all those questions in the meantime, because it's a lot to think about. So not to be so specific that the numbers are going to be recorded, or there's going to be some type of a vote that the highest numbers get something, but just again, a way to inform a decision I'm making with a lot of various groups and equity issues in mind.
Thanks, Jen.
You know, I think that the fact that we are actually thinking about design and the impact phase of this exercise, where we're actually calling out specific groups that we want to understand more in detail, that itself underscores the need for a focused discussion on whatever is the intent of the tag in defining specific strategies or specific criteria for the clean heat standard. All those things need to be looked at from that group's perspective. The only way to look at it from the group's perspective is to apply the rubric in the lens of the group and say whether it works or not. So I think the fact that we are actually thinking about kind of distributing ourselves to give a voice to these groups, I think that underscores the importance.
So what I've been hearing, okay, go ahead, Mia.
I think I was about to do the same thing you were, but just saying, like, it sounds like it would be helpful for our group to articulate some of what we were thinking this could be used for. There's a couple different strands of this going, so I'm not sure how that easy that it would be, but I do think it would be good potentially if the equity rubric group met again, created some sort of basic explainer language of how we thought this was going to be used, and take it back to this group so we could vote on whether we're on the same page.
Ben?
Yeah, I would echo that suggestion that the equity rubric group meet again. I went through after the tag meeting and hearing, I was on the tag meeting listening in. After hearing that, I kind of went through the rubric, with a fine-tooth comb. Kind of some of these questions I think need to be reworded as well. Kind of like Srini mentioned, if you kind of put yourself in the tags position and then read through, the way they read doesn't really make a ton of sense, or it could just be reworded or a couple things deleted and etc. So I think, yeah, if we had some time to do that as a equity rubric group, that would be great. We could polish it up a bit and make the intent a little more clear. I think that would be a good use of time.
Ben? So Dominic, would this be something that we would need to have another vote on for the equity rubric group to reconvene, or is that something that we can just?
No. If the full group wants to direct the subgroup to do a specific thing, that would be a good use of a vote. If my memory serves, there was some disagreement on the intended use of this rubric in that subgroup. So if the group as a whole wants to be more clear about that and then direct the subgroup to do some sort of cleanup work, that'd be good. Otherwise, if the group is ready to meet and get to work, we do not need a vote.
Well heard. So from what I was hearing, it sounds like there's a need for more focused discussion on on how to use the rubric, whether or not it is a checklist or a straw poll helper, just a way of thinking through questions and things like that. So maybe some type of further explanation on what that what the intent is, the intent for use. And then also just putting ourselves in the shoes of the tag and walking through some of the questions and making sure that they're clearly worded and straightforward enough to be able to use in the way that the EAG intends it to be used. Jen? You're on mute.
I think as a group, we worked a bit with the language to not make it seem like we were telling the tag how to use it. So maybe we can also just address some ways that we thought it would be used, but honestly, it's, you know, whatever, in my mind, whatever works for them. It was just a tool. So maybe we can put language into that, or if there's a tag liaison who wants to come and talk to our group, you know, that's another way to see what the tag's concerns are with it. Maybe just give them some assurance that whatever way it works best for you, there aren't any strings attached to how it should be used. Honestly, I think by another group, every group's going to use it, I think, a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well heard. And we do have our 2 tag liaisons here. So I don't know, were you suggesting having another person, another member of the tag coming in to talk to us, or with specific questions, or just
Probably best for us to meet and see if the other people on the subcommittee and then the rest of the group as a whole agree that that's kind of the intent, that we don't want to have, nobody has to report back to us on how they use the equity rubric, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So if other team members share that idea, I think we can convey that however they want to use it, there's not someone that's going to judge them how they use it.
Emily, sorry, your hand's up now, but I was actually gonna request if you're able to share the notes with us so that the EAG rubric group can have the specific thoughts, so that to help guide the conversation. That was something that you could do.
Absolutely. And I think I just wanted to reiterate that I know I gave a lot of feedback really quick. The 2 main points, if I could summarize it all, is between a discussion that the tag would like internally to decide how they're going to use it. And then I think the other consensus was a lot of folks were looking for more feedback about how to use it. Like, I think that that's something that I wanted to communicate as well. And I know I gave a lot of feedback. So I'll send in writing after this meeting in memo format, just like a rough list of all of those notes that I just read out loud.
Thank you, Emily. Mia?
Yeah, and I'll add, you know, building off what Jen said, I think it would be helpful to explain, like, we don't expect people to like report back to us. It's supposed to be a tool to guide. And I think people are also a little confused about, like, is there some sort of scoring element, or that you should have like a net positive like result or something like that. I think that sort of like specific feedback is what the tag has been asking us. So I don't think the subgroup needs to get hyper specific, but just explain the kind of more of a guiding questions thing. And maybe there's some labeling that the group could also consider to just make it more clear that I think this group is saying that there's not a score or a net value. It's you know, searching questions type of thing. So, and I respect that there will maybe still be some agreement within the subgroup of exactly how people should use it, but I think the focus should be coming up with guidance that you think the EAG as a whole can live with and will produce sort of reasonable outcomes and a good use of this rubric. So that's what I'd encourage that group to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Mia. So I think we have some good steps moving forward on that. If there's anyone else who has any thoughts, I want to make sure I don't close this too soon.
Just it's helpful hearing that feedback, and I appreciate Emily kind of putting in those 2 bullet points, like tag's going to talk about how to use it, and then more instruction on just how to use it. That's helpful. Do you get us? I guess my question for I guess maybe Emily, since you're the note taker, do you get a sense like we're willing to use it. We've just got to figure out how to use it.
I think there's mixed feelings, but I think overall folks had positive feedback on the potential of using this. I think there was a couple folks in agreement that there was overwhelm about like where specifically to use it, feeling overwhelmed about there are many opportunities that this could be used in the tag and the many decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
So relaying that, I think there were more than a few comments on that. And again,
Yeah.
happy to share that
Yeah.
overview of my notes.
Would there be somebody we could reach out to that could kind of represent tag, just kind of like to be honest, like I don't know if we should put a lot of time into something that's not going to end up being adopted. So like we want this to be useful, so like collaborate, just how can we put this to use here, and if it's not going to be used, then let's, that's helpful input too.
Srini?
So I think I go back to my earlier comment about, the body of work that's going to come out with this May deadline that PUC is going to take and develop a position on. I'm sure there are going to be some specific design aspects that's going to get highlighted or that's going to get focused. And I think the rubric can be applied even on those high-level concepts or high-level strategies as they are articulated today. I don't know what they are, how it's going to look like. It could be a pilot exercise pretty soon to take the rubric, go through the questions, and if it is done with the representative from TAG or a couple of people from TAG, do it as a joint exercise and get through the, shake it down, get through the, whatever hiccups we have around this tool, let's get past it so that people get familiar with it and it's actually useful for implementation for all the design aspects going forward.
And Srini, is that a suggestion to do that now, to go ahead and try to find some people from the tag that we could walk through the credit ownership with?
It's not clear to me what is the output out of this exercise, initial exercise. I would, it's kind of hard for me to put my arms around some material aspects of this. I'm looking for some material aspects as a result of this initial exercise that PUC has coordinated. If there are material aspects, I think knowing how the climate action plan was used for equity, I think we can apply the rubric and see, take a study group of the 7 or 8 groups that we have listed here, take one that is easy to apply for and see how that rubric, what the rubric tells us and where we come out.
Okay. So
Right?
test
You don't learn something until you actually do it. So I'm just suggesting that, let's pilot the approach.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Srini. Yeah, I kind of did that on my own. Just like I said, okay, if I'm on tag and I'm going to recommend a credit ownership outcome X, went through and that's where I discovered, okay, this question doesn't really make sense. And, I think that's how you flush out the changes that need to be made. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. Mia?
Yeah, the PUC has asked the credit ownership group that was producing memos to do that very thing. I think that would be a useful exercise. We did not make enough progress last time to also find time to do that. I think that would be, I think there are still some outstanding credit ownership issues that we could consider for the final report, and maybe that's something we road test with that group. It's, I think, the most concrete policy thing we've had to grapple with. So I think that would make sense. It's later than ideal, but let's try to find a time for that credit subcommittee to meet in the coming weeks and to test that out once I think the rubric subcommittee goes through another round. So we'll plan on that. Before we move on, I know, Pike, you emailed the group about adding transparency as an item, which I think sounds, oh, Pike, are you able to speak that out? Otherwise, I'll have to have Ashira.
Yeah, I
read
can
it.
read it out, because I added another piece since I last sent it. So I was thinking of adding this to the accountability, based on my comment and other comments, in the past. Is the decision-making process for the proposed action clear, honest, and transparent? Are potential harms of the proposed action clearly identified and disclosed? Are potential beneficiaries of the proposed action clearly identified, and is the benefit clearly articulated?
I don't want to put everybody on the spot with that exact language, but I think it's worth considering. I was wondering if we could consider having the equity rubric group talk about that language and consider incorporating it, and then bringing sort of a 2.0 version with both of those elements back in. I don't know if we need a motion for that. Looking at you, Dominic. I think we don't, because I think it's just, let's have, unless there's opposition, have that subcommittee consider Pike's suggestion and figure out how to incorporate it, and we'll vote on the revised plan as a whole. Does that sound good, Pike? Do you think that gets to what you were concerned about?
Yeah,
I
that
think
works
it's
for
a good
me.
suggestion. Okay, great.
Thank you, Pike, and thank you, Mia. And one last thing that I wanted to touch base on with the rubric itself, given that the exercise to create the outlines that we just went through that you'll be doing this week is very vague and open, I would suggest that if you do want to think about your demographic group and kind of run that through the outline, any recommendations that you might give through the outline as through the rubric as well. And if you decide to do that, just note that you have done that. That would be just helpful information for all of us to see how the rubric is working and how it's not. If you decide that that might be too much of a task for you in these next 2 weeks, that's fine. Just note that you didn't do that so that we can kind of see how it's working with it and how it's working without it. That's my suggestion. Take it or leave it. Okay. So moving on, we have feedback from the public engagement subgroup. And so I'll turn to Emily if you'd like to give us some updates on that.
Yeah. So the public engagement subgroup was myself, Jen, and John. And I brought in one additional staff from Efficiency Vermont who has deeper experience with public engagement. So we were all mainly prepared, and the intention was for us to discuss best practices in our member organizations on the topic of public engagement to share with the PUC for their awareness and future and incoming public engagement work related to the Clean Heat Standard. And I did write up a memo that is a summary of what these shared best practices look like. And I think I'm happy to share a summary of what those best practices are right now, if that makes sense, like a 2-minute summary, and then I can talk about next steps.
Be great.
Okay. So some of these best practices include community engagement sites. And this is just a summary, but this included places where people will not need to take additional time out of their day to attend. So the group noted the importance of in-person engagement. Some of the locations of public engagement mentioned include locations of aging communities, senior centers, meal sites for Meals on Wheels, food banks, community centers, libraries, manufactured home sites. And again, noting that the common thread is that these locations are already places people go to during their day, which can minimize the resources that many need to use to access public engagement events. We also discussed accessibility, and this included affinity spaces, leveraging and empowering existing community leaders to share information versus relying solely on outside voices. Focus groups and listening sessions, interpretation and translation of the Clean Heat Standard was a topic, and ensuring widespread public understanding of clean heat measures such as heat pumps, and having skilled interpreters, not only in the language of the clean heat standard, but in the technical jargon. And then we finally reviewed some potential questions for the PUC to ask the public in the outreach phase, and highlighting the difference of asking the public questions that are not going to be asked in these like publicly facilitated meetings, so not in like a public place. So I did write up a memo that's just like a really high level summary of these best practices. And in terms of next steps, I guess the question is, should this be sent to the PUC? Formally, the PUC attended that breakout group meeting, so they were listening. I don't know if that was enough feedback for the PUC or the EAG. So yeah, putting it back to the group, and I think Mia, in terms of what next steps are, and with that information that we discussed and shared. And
Thank you.
Jen, feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
Yeah, I'd like to open it up to anyone else who was part of the subgroup. I think it was just Jen and John.
Yeah.
Jen, you're on mute.
I think that's a great summary that you did, and it really did highlight. I think as far as community engagement, we wanted to make sure that there was a variety in the ways that people interacted with the public input. So the in-person, the places where people are already at, knowing that there could be a big segment in Vermont who doesn't like Zoom or use Zoom or internet connectivity. So trying the best places. Also realizing that there aren't that many planned public engagement opportunities at this moment. So other ways to get the word out so that people are getting information about the act and what's going on. So maybe they can't make it to one of the official public input engagements, but how do we get information out about it? And again, at these kind of community engagement sites, so people know what's going on, so they know they can talk to people in their community or some of their community leaders about this if they have some concerns. And yeah, so I think the summary's great. And I think another question that came up was, I think right now there's the 3 planned ones, and then maybe 2 other ones are after the fact of the act. So there was only 1 other planned one, and that might be something that we can all consider as a group too. How will we continue to have this engagement with the public after maybe these first 3 or 4 planned public input sessions are completed?
I also just wanted to add one thing. In the memo, I used language that didn't suggest these best practices as recommendations, but instead just information sharing of what has worked best in our member organizations in public engagement for the PUC's awareness. So versus like, this is what we're recommending you do, this is some best practices and learnings that we're sharing.
Thank you, Jen and Emily. So there are 2 requests, one for feedback and specifically on this memo. So if anyone has feedback, and then additionally, what are the next steps for this? Is this something that we are now sending? Is this something where the group continues to meet, and if they continue to meet, with what purpose? So we'll start with the first one, just feedback in general on this memo, thoughts, questions, concerns, additions. And so you should also have the memo. I sent it in the chat as well, but I'll scroll through it here so that you can see it. Chris?
It's more of just just clarifying intended use. So I love all of this. Is this instructions that we're giving back to the community outreach folks so that they can have future sessions based on this, or is this I guess what's the recommendation that we're asking? This is it kind of goes back to the equity rubric a little bit. Like, technical advisory is moving ahead. They've got their own timeline. Is the expectation that we're going to gather some of this in the meantime? Because like, it's great we're collecting feedback, but if we're not using it for design, like I'm just trying to reconcile the parallel paths here.
So if I can answer that, we originally met out of response to questions that Mia and the group had for the public engagement facilitator and the PUC, and we had some feedback that Mia had shared from the PUC. This is not, I guess our response was this is like the PUC's work doing public engagement, and the group met with member organization experience in public engagement to share with the PUC for their awareness to utilize potential future public engagement work with or without the public engagement facilitator. I know those next couple of meetings are coming right up, and the PUC did give an update in terms of what public engagement looks like after these public facilitated meetings, which is only a part of, I think, their planned public engagement. So Dominic can add anything if I mischaracterize that, but this is not recommendations to the public engagement facilitator or the PUC. This is just sharing our experiences of what has worked with public engagement for the PUC's awareness to distribute or not to distribute to who they're working with for public engagement.
Yeah.
Did that help, Chris?
Thank you.
Ashwini.
Yeah, so I think the question I had was similar to what Chris was commenting on. I see the public engagement sessions serving two purposes. One is to educate the public on what the clean heat standard is, and to the extent that you can, level the playing field and bring everyone to a common understanding, I think that would be beneficial. The second is really around any specific concerns or inputs that you can leverage to feed the TAG as well as EAG along the design phase of this whole initiative. So I think it's very useful to have these best practices on what has worked or what is more effective. But I still go back to, we have 3 sessions, and I think we have 1 remaining session in early June. And I would think that with the document that Dominic shared just coming out, there is a lot more opportunity for education through public engagement sessions still left to do. That's what I would think.
Thanks. Mia?
Yeah, in response to sort of what Emily said, I just want to recap. So, we started this out sort of not sure what was being communicated to the public, and there was sort of a request for information from members of this group, to the public engagement facilitator about like what the plan was. And then, the first session happened, and it, quite frankly, wasn't very well attended, and was kind of messy in terms of, a little unfocused in that way. And, sometimes that happens with public events, but that was a concern that I heard from other people and from members of this group as well. So I think that sort of launched a process of, asking the PUC to get more involved and to help shape this discussion, which I think they've started to do. I listened to the one from last week. You can all do that as well. I think it was better attended than the first one. It was still not super well attended. There weren't a ton of people there, especially members of the public who aren't part of agencies or, sort of the usual people who already comment on these processes. So yeah, I think my hope with this group was that we'd have a more organized conduit to the PUC than just me emailing PUC staff and trying to sort of congregate our concerns in an orderly way. So trying to make sure that represents everything that the group is concerned about and kind of in an organized fashion. And then, yeah, I think, to points that have been made, there's 1 session left that's planned. There's going to be more sessions. you know, I think these best practices are great, and I think it's good that we have them, and I think it should make an appearance in our final report. I do think we should focus on like things we could ask the PUC or the public engagement facilitator to do to make sure that the last session is really good and that, you know, we feel like they're on a track to get enough public input to inform this process. Thanks.
Thank you, Mia. Ben?
Yep, agree with everything Mia just said. And Chris, to your question, I just did want to point out that this is one of the duties laid out in the statute for us, is to provide feedback to the commission on strategies for engaging Vermonters with low and moderate income. So that would be, this checks that box, you know, if we provide a thorough memo to the commission on this topic. So just a reminder of one of our tasks there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So for Emily and Jen, does this give us enough information? Are there any questions for the rest of the EAG just about some of the feedback?
If the group wants to be a little bit more specific about its use, that could be helpful. I agree. I think because we're charged under the act to cover public input, not just through the facilitator, but I would say ongoing, and I would say even throughout the process. I think these are really give some really good feedback on how it can be continued. I don't know too whether we have any ability to recommend that there be more public input. I mean, the original contract was for a certain amount of public engagements, but maybe informing that I think there's still a lot of people that need to be reached, and in a variety of ways. Maybe we can make a recommendation that there be more public input sessions. So I think this is ongoing to that part of the act that you mentioned, Ben, as far as we want equity in the whole process. And I don't know how much we can influence the current. Be great to give some recommendations for the next meeting, but I'd like to see that there's also recommendations for whatever way public input is sought and public engagement going both ways in the future.
Thank you, Jen. Dominic, I see your hand.
I wanted to chime in with just a couple of things. First, to the point Jen just made, yes, we also see the need for additional public input. Unfortunately, we were not given particularly vast amounts of time or money to pursue those things. So, you know, if there are low or no cost ways to do more public engagement, we would be interested in it. But as I'm sure you all can tell, we are, you know, using maximizing our resources in trying to do this. The second thing, and I say this more from my perspective rather than the perspective of the PUC, is some of the most useful things that we could get out that I think would be most useful to the PUC and the public engagement facilitator out of this subgroup is one, and I would say foremost, distribution channels for invites to public engagement. We do have one scheduled for June. So if you have an email list that either we could send you something to send down or you send us to send something down, that would be a very actionable thing that we could do to reach more people and have these conversations. And then two, if the subgroup or full group could agree on a small set of questions, and I want to emphasize small, like, you know, around 3 that this group thinks would be particularly useful in making these public engagement conversations as effective as they can be. That would be very useful as well. You know, we did hire a professional to do this, and we do not want to spend our time negating his efforts. But if there's a small list, we could definitely hand that off and say, please incorporate this to the maximum extent that you can over the course of the meeting.
Thank you, Dominic. Chris?
So just what Mia said makes a lot of sense. We want to make the best use out of this last input session. And, you know, Ben, I pulled up the language from the statute, providing feedback to the commission on strategies for engaging Vermonters with low income and moderate income, the public process for developing the clean heat standard program. So I guess just seeking clarification of what is the interpretation of developing the clean heat standard program? Is that a PUC action after these groups have concluded, or is developing the work that is happening right now?
I'll chime in quickly to say our work developing the clean heat standard started on June 30th of last year and is ongoing.
Does that answer your question, Chris?
No, I mean, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer. It just seems like it's awesome. We'll maximize this last public input session, but how would that input that's gained from that session be utilized to develop the clean heat standard?
Very fair question, Chris. And I want to make one point before answering it specifically. The one coming up in June is the third and last one that is currently scheduled. We do have Curtis contracted for 3 more meetings as well, that any improvements that come out of this group will be applied to. We just haven't scheduled them yet because they are going to be more focused around our draft rule as directed by statute. The second piece of how is this used by the PUC, I have to say is someone who has attended, national PUC conferences and stuff of that nature. This is a question that's being asked throughout the entire industry. What does it actually mean to influence a PUC proceeding? From my perspective, we have an obligation to read and consider all of the materials that are put in front of us. Most times that comes from our frequent flyers, our usual suspects who file in the case. And this is opening up a new channel of communication. And we give the same amount of weight to when we hear those things. The applicability to the decision that comes out of that is a little less clear because oftentimes in these sessions we're hearing stories rather than policy recommendations. So bridging that gap is something that we in Vermont and we as commissions, as an entity of government are working on. But the most specific answer I can give you is when we sit down with a specific policy question, we open up all of the feedback we received on the question and bring that in to inform the rationale and the arguments that we have with the commissioners and the commissioners have among themselves.
Thank you so much, Dominic. That's great.
And I saw a few hands, and some of them have gone down. I saw Srini, you had your hand up. Emily, you still have your hand up, so we'll go to you first, and then we'll come back to Srini.
Yeah. So Dominic, just listening to your comments about.
I actually said we'd go to Emily first.
Oh, sorry.
No worries, Rini. Sorry about that. So my comment was just, thanks to Dominic for sharing those asks. That would be helpful. And I just wanted to respond to those real quick. In terms of my Efficiency Vermont's participation in public engagement, sharing information, we don't use distribution channels like email lists for public engagement. So I don't think will be much helpful. A lot of our public engagement experience is shared in that memo that is just, I think, uses money and time. And so I think just reflecting on next steps, it sounds like maybe that memo is just a good document that we shared with best practices, and we can just sit tight on that. And then, the 3 questions that would be useful in making engagement sessions as useful as they could be. Just wanted to say heard that. And if anyone else, I think I'm just suggesting if anyone else in the group has more information to share and wants to join the group if we decide to meet again regarding email lists and distribution channels. I think that would be helpful, just reflecting that Efficiency Vermont doesn't have much information and materials to share on that front.
Thank you, Emily. Srini, your hand went down.
Yeah, so hearing the limited outlook of the public engagement sessions and funding issues and all that, I just wonder whether there is value in reaching out to the community through other channels to get more public input from a design perspective. For example, I thought I heard somebody say that in the second session, there was some participation that represented energy committees from different towns. People who are engaged in the energy committee are very well informed. And for example, the publication that Dominic shared, once it is finalized, you could literally reach out to all the city managers within Vermont and disseminate their information through their respective energy committees. That's a good way of reaching out to the communities and encourage them to engage in other community sessions that may be planned in the future, or even the June 6th one. So, I mean, June 6th is not too far away, but I'm just suggesting that there are ways to get attention of different community groups by engaging with the right representation. So,
Thank you, Srini. Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Srini just said. I think the members of this group, between all of us, we have a pretty extensive, community here in the state of stakeholders. For example, Chris, the mobile home subcommittee we attended last week. Thank you for the invite on that. I sat in on that. We talked about the Clean Heat Standard briefly, and my takeaway was that there was, very little understanding of the Clean Heat Standard amongst that group of who I would consider very well-informed people. So, if we can kind of look inward at this group and submit it, I think send it around to our communities, I think that would be a great start, because kind of like it or not, I think a lot of people will be, affected by the Clean Heat Standard. It's a pretty broad statute. So I think the more people we bring into the fold now, the better. So.
Thank you, Ben. And that might also dovetail with I forget who exactly suggested it, but just if you have email lists in your networks it was Dominic. If you have email lists in your network that you could send and we could collect for Dominic and for the PEC to also send out the invitations and any other upcoming meetings. It sounds like that would be appreciated. Okay, and then we'll go to Jen.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we want to add outreach, engagement, email list to our individual demographic sections. So that way people can add their expertise for specific outreach engagement with those specific groups and have that be part of the final reports, since that will be ongoing engagement.
I think that's a great idea. I'll add that to the email that I send out. So outreach, engagement email list, and I added or tactics for specific demographic groups. Add to outline section. Thanks, Jen. Mia?
Yeah, to that point, I think I just want to level set expectations. Like, we were not set up to do public outreach on our own. We don't have our own budget, besides Ashira's help. I think we should make sure that if we're doing outreach, it's sustainable and it answers the questions that we want. I just think this group, like, an ideal process would have had us start 2 years ago and be super informed and talk to absolutely everybody we could on this. I just don't think that's what we've been set up to do here. And I think if you have a question in your section when you start to get researching about a topic, I think that's absolutely worth reaching out to the expert or, an agency that provides those services. I just think we're going to be limited in our ability. So I think we should focus, I personally think we should focus on getting the word out. If there's an easy way you can do, if your agency has like a blog or social media, that's a great way to share, you know, the meetings, or coordinate with the PUC on getting lists out there. And, you know, and I think specifically the questions that we could ask to be incorporated in the next meeting. And I think this subcommittee could also review what happens in the final meeting after the fact and see if there are, you know, further suggestions for the last 3 sessions. But I do think that this subgroup's work should be mostly an advisory group. And I think we should be cautious about trying to take on more than we can reasonably deliver in terms of our own public outreach.
Thank you, Mia. Jeff?
Yeah, hi, sorry, I know I use the chat too much. But I'd offered, I can send it out to our 5 community action agencies and the folks that work in our program at those agencies for them to share. I think that'd be quite easy. And also that 1 pager I think is really good along with it. And some folks here at Department for Children and Families, I think we could get some good participation very easily. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I think we're winding down a little bit. I think we have a good list of action items to talk about, to work towards within the next meeting, and some questions to think through as well. I will move us on so that we make sure that we have enough time. Actually, we do have a lot. We do have some time, so I'll just open it up once more if there's any other questions, concerns, thoughts.
Yeah, I guess in terms of just making sure we're all clear on action items, the next time we'll meet as a full group is the 28th. That's technically, you know, before the 7th. It's not a ton of time before the June 7th meeting. I think we should just make sure that we're setting up the subgroup for success with specific requests we have of them, or specific things we want the PUC to do right now.
Thank you, Mia. So of that, I'm hearing for specific action items are finding distribution channels for invites for the public engagement meetings. So particularly Dominic was asking for email lists and people that we can send it to. Agreeing on 3 questions that would be useful in making engagement sessions as useful as they could be. In outreach and engagement lists, for adding outreach and engagement lists to specific demographics. So that's actually something for everyone here to do. For the memo itself, we're looking at what is the intended use of this best practice memo. Not just recommendations for the facilitator, but so what are we aiming, how should the PUC use this? How should this be viewed? What are some of the specific concerns and inputs that we could give for the public engagement facilitator for the next sessions? Additional low cost or no cost ways to do more public engagement. Reaching out, could the public engagement facilitator reach out through other channels? Like the Public Energy Committee, so finding more ways like that. And then we have the request to keep things sustainable. Those are the things that we've talked about so far. Are there more? Jen?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I wasn't suggesting that we include current suggestions about our demographic for this last meeting in our outlines. I was just thinking a broader way to capture best practices going forward. So not taking on any of that work that we're going to try to get, you know, our demographic to learn about this next input outside of just general suggestions, but just seemed like a good another bullet point on each demographic going forward when we finally share our report.
Heard. Thank you. And Emily?
I think just to answer a couple of those questions that we've talked about, one, I think the answer to the memo question is that is just a summary of best practices, and the PUC was listening to that discussion. And it sounds like that was enough for the PUC, and they're looking more for those direct email chains and the questions. And then in terms of the group that had already met meeting again, it seems like the direct email chains is something people can do on their own. And so it doesn't seem like the group should meet to gather those email chains that people have independently. And then, but feel free to disagree with me if anyone has any other thoughts. And then in terms of the questions, I wonder if that's something we can do in the EAG meetings, or if others want to meet to discuss those 3 questions.
So any thoughts on that?
I don't think it would be too much of an ask for us to brainstorm questions to ask before the next meeting. I think that would be a pretty easy task for us to all to do. If it means avoiding a subgroup meeting, but.
Okay, let's be prepared to vote next time, just because of that. Like, we can't take another one after this just because the PUC won't be able to incorporate that, or the public engagement facilitator. I want to make sure that they definitely have at least a week to, engage with that. So let's make that an expectation that we'll come prepared to finalize that list of questions that we will request that they ask. Sounds good. And then, yeah, I think there might be more of a role for this group to resume activities at some future point. It might be useful, like I mentioned, to review what happens in the last session, and there'll be a bit of a break, it sounds like, for the final 3 sessions. So that would be good to sort of see if there's a feedback loop we can intervene in. So, but I agree, it's always good to be able to skip a subcommittee meeting for a week. So let's do that. Okay, assuming there are no other questions or concerns, I will turn it over myself to talk about credit ownership. Yeah, so to recap where we went, we kind of got into a discussion about the early action period. And I guess to step back, in a previous meeting, so to recap the timeline, we thought that the PUC deadline for credit feedback was going to be earlier. So we already submitted a memo about credit ownership that was voted on by this whole group to the PUC, about credit ownership issues. And then the PUC came back and said, oh, you have more time than we thought. So we met again as a group to see if we could flesh out issues that we didn't really think we had fully dealt with in the first memo. And I think the main things that we really hadn't touched on, that we've kind of addressed to varying degrees, was what to do during the early action period about credit ownership, what to do with installed fuels, and then this question about whether or not some exception should be made for projects that are fully paid for by not the property owner, and specifically the WAP program. So we met again last week to see if we could make any progress. I don't think, and I'll let the other members of the group speak, I think we had a really good, interesting conversation, but I don't think we moved the needle much further. That said, we do have another memo that kind of fleshes out what we've been talking about more and reiterates our positions. I think there's value there. I don't think it really changes the status quo of what we had. It kind of outlines, thoughts we had about ownership, the discussions we had about the WAP program and whether there's a specific benefit to giving them exception. And then our feeling that the ownership structure should be the same for the early action period and the regular clean heat standard implementation. But we didn't really get into the weeds of like the hows and whys you would go about doing that. So like I said, I think there's some value there. I think this group, the subcommittee, generally had consensus over the version that Ashira is sending, but I'll make sure that that's the case with the group. So it's up for this group to sort of in this next couple minutes, make any addendums and sort of agree, I guess, vote to accept this memo and pass it on to the PUC, or vote to sort of leave it as it was with the first memo, which we're not going to unpack. So a little confusing timeline wise, but thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to step back now and I'm going to pass it over to Ashira to facilitate and our other subcommittee members to weigh in on. Thanks.
Sorry about that, speaking into a mute mic. Thank you so much, Mia. And I do want to open it up for comment if any of the other subcommittee members would like to speak to this, or if anyone who has reviewed the memo would like to speak to this. As Mia said, we are looking to either vote to send this to the PUC today or make any adjustments that would make it able to be sent. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, it seems like some of the points there's been a lot of back and forth on, and I feel like it's okay to send a memo that just indicates two different opinions. We're not actually implementing it, we're giving guidance. So I think as long as we clearly state the points that both sides have made, particularly to the weatherization, and maybe say where those points have come from. So someone that has a lot of information or experience with it feels this way. There's other concerns. I feel like that's okay to share that in that way without a consensus, because personally I don't have the experience to say whether it should go one way or the other. So I really appreciate the robust discussion about it. It lets me know what two sides' feelings are, but it's just one of those issues I really feel like I can't decide one way or the other.
Thank you, Jen. Pike?
Yeah, I just would like to second Jen's comments. I think I also agree it's okay to have this document say that there was not consensus on this issue.
Thank you, Pike. Jeff?
Yeah, I guess, definitely I disagree. I think the WAP, I think home ownership otherwise is fine with me, but when WAP pays for it, if that money doesn't, or the money applicable through the credits doesn't go back to our program, we're not going to be able to serve we're not going to be able to serve enough folks, low income folks, that are then going to avoid these increased costs of this clean heat standard. So it's just a big issue for us here, but like this document isn't going to turn into law or what have you, but I think at least expressing the difference in opinion, I guess is fine. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And before I get to Shuni, I do want to pause. And so I'm hearing that several people are okay with having a document that has a difference of opinion and notes the difference of opinion. And so just for process, we'll need to figure out what that difference of opinion is and how that can be expressed, because right now we have the one document. Just a note, but moving on to Shuni.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that we don't have the language around early credits. It keeps the document much cleaner. I like that. On the discussion of the WAP, I think we had quite a bit of discussion about this, the meeting prior to last meeting, about how the effectiveness of WAP and how good a change agent they have been, and what can be leveraged out of their experience and all that stuff. But I think the way the document is laid out, we are not saying that it's a clear decision. There is a discussion around looking at both approaches. So I'm okay with stating the language as it is written right now. I also would like to point out that we don't know where TAG stands on this. So TAG is going to have a position as well, right? And I haven't heard anything about whether any type of feedback about what type of discussions came up for TAG around this. So I think it's good to express all the different perspectives and points of view and see how PUC uses that. So
Thank you, Srini. Ben?
Yeah, I just I guess I would second what Jeff said. I'm fine with you know, laying out both opinions in this memo, you know, when it does come to the weatherization assistance program, as long as they're both clearly stated. You know, I've thought about the kind of how to frame the weatherization issue in this context, and I guess I distill it down to the question that, you know, is giving the initial ownership credit to the property owner more equitable than giving you know, the credits to the weatherization assistance program to generate more revenue and serve more Vermonters. So I really think the more equitable choice is to give the weatherization assistance program the initial ownership. But again, as long as that's laid out very clearly in this document to show both opinions, then I would also support that. But yeah, we would, as long as it's drafted in that way.
Thank you, Ben. Chris?
So, all right, from the perspective of a mobile home owner, you know, they are generally going to be on leased land. You know, through some outreach, we've quickly pretty much identified moving to a heat pump is a heavy lift that's going to be out of reach for a lot of folks. So they're not going to be the property owner. You know, they might be able to benefit from weatherization, but it's going to be heavily subsidized. So could somebody just help me understand how moving forward with the recommendation to support the property owner receiving that credit would benefit a mobile home owner who can't access the heat pump?
Yeah, do you have a direct answer to that question, or do you have a different topic?
Yeah, I think we discussed this. Part of the discussion about the property owner was that the initial memo references the fact that the idea of a customer was a little vague, and we basically thought what the PUC staff meant was when you say customer or end user, you're talking about the person who owns the property in which the measure is being installed. That would clear up any confusion about like, oh, someone's purchasing the heat pump and then selling it back to me, the homeowner, for example. So that was just sort of that conclusion. I think there is equity issues to be explored. Like that doesn't help renters. And, you know, in a manufactured home, if you own the manufactured home on like a lot where you rent, you'd still be the credit owner because you own the home in which it's implemented. That's how I'm understanding this to be written. I think this doesn't circumvent all equity issues. I think in our discussions, we thought it was the most equitable, while also just, you know, as this memo represents, getting into like who pays for the property or who induces it to happen is going to get really messy. And we thought that it had the best hope for, you know, homeowners and, you know, other people living in these buildings to benefit more directly from it. But it's not perfect. Does that answer the question about like what we were thinking about this?
It's helpful framing it. I think the assumption there is that if the mobile home owner was able to take advantage of the program, they would receive the credit. What I'm saying is kind of like that's an assumption that I don't think we should make, that only because they're not likely going to be able to get a heat pump. Now, they could get weatherization if that's, and I do have a clarifying question about that. If that is a measure that's eligible to receive a credit, that's something different. But what Jeff said about funding WAP, like it became abundantly obvious or clear to me, like WAP is just is going to need a lot of funding, and accessibility and criteria expanded to really serve these households. Because I'm concerned that, you know, like cares, you know, so somebody who they're paying, again, this is the concern I'm trying to address here, and I need somebody to talk me through this. I don't want the output of this is that the credit goes to wealthier neighborhoods that's being paid for by increased costs from my mobile home residents who can't access the program. That's the thing I'm trying to address here. How does this recommendation support, like, that's not what it's going to be, because it's the most vulnerable population. I don't know. So that's where I could just use some help, and it's a very complex topic. So thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Ben and Jen, do either of you have direct answers to Chris's question? Ben?
I do. I guess just if we're speaking plainly, there a greater portion of mobile homeowners in the state will benefit more if WAP has more funding to serve that population. Just kind of to put it, bluntly. Whether mobile homeowners broadly are not going out and weatherizing themselves. They're relying on the weatherization program to do that work for them. As you mentioned, they can't access heat pumps typically, and if they did, it would probably be through the weatherization program. So I think it's just generally more people in mobile homes are going to see greater benefits if weatherization is expanded and gets the credit.
Chris, did that answer your question? You're on mute.
Yeah, no, I see Mia's got her hand up, and Jen, I'm just listening to feedback here.
Okay.
Yeah, to reiterate, and this again, we talked a lot about this the first time. We didn't get to it last time. I think the thing is basically like all of these credits are probably going to change hands immediately. So, the average property homeowner is not going to be able to use these credits anyways. They're going to find someone to sell it to. If ownership originates with them, we thought that this was the best shot for them to actually get something in exchange for their services. Presumably, if you are, financing a project or entirely paying for it like WAP, you could say, hey, you need to give me your credit, homeowner, otherwise I'm not going to do this service for you. I think it's complicated. Like I said, we really went back and forth on this. I'm kind of agnostic beyond the whole. I think getting really complicated about who's paying for what has some potential unintended consequences. So I think you're right to have questions about this. We did. My goal was to get something that we could give feedback to the PUC rather than nothing. So totally hear you. This is not perfect. I don't feel very strongly about this. That's just kind of where we landed, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Mia. Jen?
Yeah, I guess from an equity standpoint, saying that certain people, basically because they're eligible for weatherization, puts them in a different category of ownership in the credit, I think takes a little bit of their freedom of choice away. Maybe somebody that would be eligible for weatherization wants to do something different with their credit. I also think that I don't know quite how it's all going to work, but it does seem like if weatherization put something in someone's house, they would get the credit and that would have some value to it. So I don't quite understand the path that it's going to take money out of weatherization. And the third thing is, I've heard from a couple people that do use heat pumps in their mobile homes, and with technology going forward, it's quite possible that someone might use it either for heating or cooling. So I'm not sure that it precludes everyone from using, a heat pump. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Jen. Ben?
Yeah, and I think I just also wanted to add, just more broadly, taking a step back on the weatherization issue. I'm kind of, obviously have made my points clear on this, but I guess I'm coming at it from a perspective of just good policy making, is one that is simple as possible. It meshes well with other existing policies. It leverages existing institutions such as the weatherization program and minimizes cost. Those are things that I've highlighted, just kind of bullet points, if you will, for why giving credit to weatherization would make sense, because it would reduce the administrative burden at the weatherization assistance program that Jeff runs. You know, it meshes well with the policy. If we were to have them give the credit to the owner of, you know, a property that weatherization is weatherizing, you're now basically making weatherization explain the clean heat credit process to thousands of people a year. You know, every one of their clients, yes, they could sign it over, but presumably the weatherization program would want to say, and this is what this line is that you're signing on to for, you know, that's an incredible administrative burden. So why don't we just suggest that we make an exception right from the get-go? The money flows to WAP so they can better serve their clients. It's an anti-poverty organization, or really program, that also does weatherization, is the way I view it. But I'll let Jeff speak to that because he knows it intimately.
And I see Jeff and I see Jen's hand, and I also know that we're getting to
Yeah.
the end of this period, and I do want to make sure that we do have a product coming out. So after Jen, I'm gonna go ahead and take the reins back a little bit.
I'll be real quick. Ben is exactly right. That just that one little step that doesn't seem much to this group will add hours of time in dollars and aggravation for clients. It would be a detriment to our program. So thanks for saying that, Ben. We'd have serious issues with that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that input, and those are the kind of thing I think who are making these comments and how strongly they are based in current policies are really important to be part of the memo.
Thank you, Jen. And so I've heard, so we've had great discussion. I think it's really great discussion. And I've heard from about 3 or 4 people that it is not necessary to have a united response. There may be pieces of this memo that we all agree on, and certain pieces that we don't agree on. Given that the deadline for the response is May 17th, and checking in to make sure that I have that date correct. So we don't have time to have another full EAG meeting. We also don't really have time to have a subgroup meeting, but I'll leave that for you to decide. But my recommendation would be, since there's not time to flesh out a united alternative, I would suggest that we move forward with the memo and then have specific individual comments on each piece, on if there's other ideas. So that's my suggestion, but I'd like to hear from the group if that is the path forward that you'd like to take, or if there's another option, given the timeline that we have. Ben?
Yeah, yep, I think that all sounds good. I've actually put all my kind of the thoughts that I've summarized here in the last 5-10 minutes on paper already. You know, I think I need to tweak them slightly, but I do have about 4 or 5 paragraphs here kind of outlining what I've explained already. That could be, I think, easily, you know, we'd have to tweak it to make it part of the overall memo, but I think something as easy as saying some members of the group think this, you know, about WAP, the WAP program. So I already have language drafted to that effect. I don't know if that's how we'd want to incorporate it, but if we want to go do more of a dissenting opinions section, or how we want to do it. But
and so for me to just clarify, my suggestion would be that instead of incorporating into the main memo, it would just be
separate.
A separate piece with your name attached to it, just because there might not be time to do the back and forth of getting everyone to agree on the next piece.
Yep.
But I'm not a member, so so that's just, yeah.
So I guess what I could do is, you know, I need to finalize this draft, but I could send that out to members, then anybody else who wants to sign on to it could do so. Is that pretty much how we'd want to go about it?
I think that's fine, but I think it should be really clear that it is individuals because I don't want us to get into open meeting law issues. So anyone can submit anything they want to the PUC at any time. I just think we should really be careful about open meeting law and group organizing. So let's make sure it's individual action unless we vote on something as a group. Thanks.
Okay. So meeting, I guess, without knowing open meeting law intimately, I guess, so how would that work? Other group members would have to draft their own, who have the same opinion as I do, would have to draft their own memo, or?
Honestly, I think that's probably the least problematic thing with open meeting law. I can have Dominic jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in to say, knowing that there is some but not universal support is the level of detail. We don't need people signing their names, like it's a convention. So I think, Ben, you represent the department, and there are other people on the call who agree with you. Send this in to me and Ashira, and we can addend it onto the bottom of this memo, put it under your name. If anyone else wants to raise their hand right now to put their name next to it as well. Jeff, there we go. Those two will carry enough weight for it to be well considered.
Cool. So I'll get this in a final format, and so basically I'd send it over, and then that final draft would be circulated so that folks could read it before it was sent in. Is that?
I don't think we can circulate it because there's
Okay.
no action to be taken. So it'd be whoever's signing on, my interpretation would be they'd have to be signing on to you now that you're going to send this on behalf of yourself and whoever else wants it. So I know it's convoluted.
Right. It'd be on behalf of the department, but or as a member of the Equity Advisory Group representing the department, right?
As long as it makes it to the end of the memo, even with the caveat of this is supported by at least Ben and Jeff, that's plenty.
Okay.
And then you don't need to coordinate and work with open meeting law outside of this current meeting.
Understood.
And I just want to check because there can be many different points of view. So is there anybody else who would like to take a similar approach to Ben, separate from Ben's point?
I'm a little confused which team we're signing up for. And it's not even so much teams. It's just just Ben and Jeff have indicated a preference for weatherization. That's correct. And right. Okay. That's where kind of I am at this point.
Great. Go ahead, Srini.
No, I was just going to suggest that, maybe for this part of the process, it's good enough to recognize that, there are two different approaches have been discussed. But I think from an impact and an implementation perspective, I think this is a very, very important point. The only reason I say that is, it sounds like from what I have heard, VAP has been a very effective change agent in having the right access to the low-income family groups, that the whole intent of the program is to make sure that they don't get compromised. So I think I clearly hear the message from Ben and Jeff here. I think maybe there needs to be more thought about this during the impact phase and the implementation phase of the report, to clearly spell out, if you don't do this, what are the consequences of, something not going right or whatever. So I think there's more opportunity there. So I just wanted to say that, I'm all for making things more efficient and robust. Vermont has got enough examples of unintended consequences through a lot of agencies, and we don't need to go in the direction. So I really think that we should focus on this more in the impact and the implementation phase and provide clarity.
And
Yeah, I
so,
don't want to, oh, sorry, go on. Sure.
and so you're recommending to provide more clarity within the report, the report itself. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, I really don't want this to be the last word on credit ownership issues because I think we'll figure out things as we go with our research to deal with that. I just think we need to make a decision, like, do we want to give feedback to the PUC now beyond what we already have about credit ownership? And, does this memo generally, not perfect, but represent like what we would like to say to them now, and we can get group consensus on. So I think, based on our really low time left, I want to make one comment on the memo, which I can clarify, but Anthea Dexter Cooper pointed out that there is a typo in it, just about when the word measure was used instead of property. So that was just a typo. I will make that correction in a final version. But beyond that, I'd like to move for a vote to approve this memo as written to send to the PUC. Do I have a second for that? Okay, that's Matt. Okay. And Dominic, I'm so bad at this still. Do we have to move for any discussion or can we move immediately for a vote? We have a second.
Just so motion was made by Mia at 2:54, recording that for the minutes. A second heard by Matt Coda. We are open for discussion. If there is no discussion, we move to a vote.
Okay, I don't want to cut that off, but we have 5 minutes left and we still need public opinions. So I'd like to move for a vote. All in favor of the memo as corrected? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, and I should raise my own hand. That's virtual hands would be great. Okay, so I'm seeing 3. Is that what we've got? Oh, 4. Let's see. So that's 4 out of let's see. I don't think that that does pass. 4. So it's tied. Okay. So okay. So I'm seeing that this motion has failed. We do not have time for further comments. So I think we could create another group of the subcommittee if there's interest, but it doesn't seem like we're going to be sending any additional feedback to the PUC ahead of the deadline. So I think we've made progress with what we've already sent them so far. I'm glad we did that. And we'll have to see what comes out of their process and the tags.
And so I just want to slow down for a minute. Sorry, Mia.
Okay. Yep.
Because there did seem there is still the option of sending the memo with an addendum from Ben and Jeff. And so I want to check in with the members who didn't vote. Is that more where you're leaning towards going, or maybe just hearing the feedback of maybe why you didn't vote for that measure? Okay. That motion.
I just want to
That's-
make sure that we have the addendum, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I didn't vote for it, because you didn't mention including what we just talked about, Ben and myself stating otherwise. Otherwise, if that was to happen, I would vote for it.
Well, again, it's a procedural thing that I don't want to get bogged in on, but like we don't have that in front of us, so we can't vote on it. Again, I don't want to put up hurdles, but like I think procedurally we cannot vote on something we don't have, so this is individual action. So you don't have to approve this if you don't want to, but I don't think we have a path for creating this alternative thing like on the fly and having people vote on it. I know that puts people in a bit of an uncomfortable situation, just trying to get like something out of this process.
And so
Correct
to
me if I'm wrong, Karen.
clarify,
I'll keep
would
my
we
vote.
be able to, sorry, to clarify, would we be able to make a vote on sending the memo with the ability for people to add addendums with their, like, individual addendums with their personal names attached? And yeah, I'm just clarifying for procedure as well.
Yes, the group could just leave that door open if it wanted to.
Okay, so would anybody like to make a motion for that specifically?
Could I put forward a proposal that maybe it'll get us the yes. I think the memo as drafted highlighted the two options. I would be open to maybe just delegating somebody with the authority to emphasize or build up that letter to really highlight, our group is split on these two options. We're split down the middle on these two options. Home ownership, WAP, other options, weren't considered. We want to communicate those preferences, period. It's
For that, I don't think we'll be able to do that because that would be a specific group addendum, and that would need an additional vote. But if somebody were to submit individual,
we couldn't just amend the existing letter just to represent both positions that are already articulated in the letter.
not within the timeline that we have.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's my understanding, but
I want something to go out from our group.
Yeah, I
Period.
mean, I think we
Yeah.
could, by a voice vote, come up with something like very specific to be inserted. I just don't know that you're gonna get to it seems like context is really important here for people. And that I don't see us getting to the details articulated in a memo that we can vote up or down on in 1 minute and take public comment. So I'm really not trying to be rigid. We went back and forth a lot about this in the subgroup and did not come up with language that seemed broadly palatable. It was a long process.
And I will assure the entire group that I have been here listening and taking some notes. I will be at the center of writing whatever the next iteration this is from the commission. I will be thinking about.
Matt, I see your hand. Jen, I see your hand. Ben, I see your hand. I also see that we're at time. But we can go ahead and take the hands. But if you do have to leave, respect your time. So Jen, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to make a motion to submit the memo to PUC with the intent that there will be individual comments on the WAP issue, and those will be addended to that memo.
Great, thank you, Jen. Do we have any seconds to that?
I second that. That was the point I was going to make, is that there's language in it that says, however, other members feel that it may be simpler, etc., to have WAP recipients sign up. Yeah, basically just noting in here, putting a sentence that says other members are, opinions on the weatherization assistance program getting credit are noted below in an addendum. Just like a one-liner.
Great. So I just want to go back to Jen again because that addition is a little different than what she originally proposed. So Jen, would you like to restate your motion, or does your motion stay the same?
My motion is that we will send the memo to the PUC, that we know that there will be an addendum of personal opinion on the WAP issue, and there will be a statement saying that that addendum is attached.
Thank you. Does anyone second that?
I will second that.
Okay. And can we take a vote? All members in favor?
Oops, wrong one.
Sure.
And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anyone not in favor? And anyone abstaining? One
I'll
abstention.
be abstaining. Yeah.
Okay. One abstention.
In my opinion as chair, I think the ayes have it. So I will work with Dominic to make sure that this is submitted in accordance with open meeting law in a way that's acceptable and that represents what the group has just decided. So now we're going to move to public comment if there is any. Giving everyone a second. I'm not hearing anything. So unless there are any further issues, we'll have to do follow-ups via email, which, Ashira and I will work on. So if there's nothing else, I will call this meeting to a close. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.